right, Miranda, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I really value and actually know your children personally. Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about them and their soccer role?
Yeah, so we have two kids, Wyatt, who's a 2010 age group, and Josie, she's a 2015. Our son started club soccer when he was about 8 or 9. And then Josie started when she started playing when she was 4 because of her older brother. So it kind of gave her, like, I feel like a little heads up in soccer, like younger sibling has their older sibling to train with.
Based off of, the two together, would you say there's a lot of laundry you have to do?
Oh my gosh, never. And between tournaments, but I think there's always something every weekend.
Can you tell me a little bit about, your process of getting your kids involved with soccer specifically? What did that look like? Where did you start?
My husband played like rec for a few years. I was never a soccer player. It's actually something we never like envisioned being like soccer parents. But it's been so great. We love the sport. I could see why so many people do. But we actually started our son in AYSO as like an outlet just to get out with friends. And he really grew to love soccer. He has some other friends that were on a club team at the time, and he actually tried out for their club team when his season ended, and he didn't make it. Actually, he was
Oh,
told, yeah, that he wasn't ready to be on the team. It was super motivating for him, and Wyatt actually started finding drills to do online, like little
oh,
videos with like just his ball, and he started like with his iPad, like without us knowing that he was going to do this or push himself into this. He'd set an alarm at 6:30 in the morning before school and started teaching himself soccer drills. Yeah, and then what happened is he tried back out for the team. Gosh, maybe it was like 8 months later, and then he made it. And
oh, that's
so,
great.
yeah, so that was kind of our soccer journey with him. And although that team was so great, as parents will find you, some teams just aren't always going to be the right fit for your kid. In between that time was about when Josie was ready to get into club soccer. And we actually had no idea where to look for her. Like, truly, even having a son in a club sport, you would think it was like a door opener for us to be like, great, get us on a team. But we would have gone with that club that he was in. But even within that club, it was a struggle to kind of find like, well, maybe this can work, maybe that can work. So finding her a team was actually not as easy for Wyatt, but we did end up finding her a team kind of through like word of mouth and emailing, figuring things out, getting recommendations. And that's how we really dove into the club soccer world.
Because like you mentioned, it's not a one size fits all where one club
Right.
might be beneficial for one kid, the other kid
Right.
might have totally different needs. What do you look for when you're looking for a team for either your son or your daughter?
That's a good question. And I will say it's different for both of them. And I think that's what's, as a parent in club soccer, there's some things on a team you might want for one child that you don't want on the other. And it's funny because things now going into it are things I might have not known to look for at that time. So essentially, though, what I am really looking for my kids, as actually they're both in transition of finding new teams, is the level where you want them to grow. I'll just speak specifically to my son is you want him to be on a team too that is going to grow him and give him confidence. So
Hmm.
it's super important to look for that for him. I think a coach's qualifications is actually really important too. Like, how long have they been coaching for? What's their experience with children, especially the age group? Because you'll notice they could be super qualified and everything looks good on paper, but how is the coach going to be with my 7-year-old? Or how's the coach going to be with my 12-year-old who's going to be 13? And understanding what does it look like with children in that age? Like it's very different. And for us, commuting is important, but we've been willing to make like, 25-30 minute drive to practice.
What's the furthest that you drive?
Oh, yeah. 30 minutes one way. 30 minutes one way. So an hour round trip total. Essentially, we prioritize other things over the distance. If it's super close, but it's not what we're looking for, then we're willing to drive a little bit further.
Well, that's great. So I know you've taken a look at Sports Bridge. You've been following us,
Ah.
for a little while. Can you tell me how parents like yourself can benefit from a platform like Sports Bridge?
Yeah, well, gosh, there's a few good things to that. One thing is I really like the resources on there about like what you should be looking for in a team. For me, that's one of the first things that stood out in the beginning of going as a new fresh parent into club soccer, as everybody starts with it's your first child, whatever, you start from the beginning, is really knowing these important questions of what should I be looking for. To me, it kind of felt like a guide of things I never thought about, but like appreciate. I also feel like there's some transparency, which sounds so funny. That's like, there's like this new level of transparency with SportsBridge, giving parents like this way to access things you feel you might have not necessarily been able to. Example, finding a team for my daughter. Who knows what that would have looked like, or with any parent starting, if you had a list of teams that you're like, okay, well, this one's actually closer to where my son practices now. So let's try out that team too. And let's try these other teams as well. I think it kind of bridges, which is so funny. It didn't even on the name, like I totally didn't even do that. It totally bridges the gap between the club world and parents, because there really is like this gap there where it's sometimes you're like, well, maybe we try this team because we played them in league and it looks like our child would fit good with their playing level. I think another big important thing is that as a parent, sometimes in like the club soccer world, you hear a lot about recruiting. So you kind of feel like maybe you're at the mercy of what like a coach sees in your child and waiting to be recruited by them, rather than when you have SportsBridge, it feels like this extra tool where like you don't have to wait to be noticed by someone. Like you don't have to wait to like hope that somebody comes talks to you. You can do it yourself. So it just feels like you have so much more control over your club soccer experience.
Absolutely. And that's really what we want to give parents is that control back, you know. Moving to Southern California was just an eye opener of how crazy it is out here with the number of players, the number of
Yes.
parents, number of coaches.
Yes.
It is crazy. Now with that being said, you know, from the coach's perspective, why do you think it's important for them to put their team on the profile?
I mean, there's a long answer and a short answer. I think the short answer is if you're a coach and you have something good to offer, like, why wouldn't you? Like, why would you not put yourself out there at a platform where people can find you? I think the long answer to it would be is there's so many parents. So for coaches who are maybe having a hard time finding players and recruiting players, it's not necessarily that like they're not wanted and it's not necessarily that their team isn't desirable, but there is this disconnect with parents not being able to find the right team. So I think it's a great tool for coaches to put themselves out there to be available for parents.
Oh, that's such a great
Yeah.
answer. Yeah, no,
Make
that's
it
a
life easier
fantastic.
too, because from our relationships with our coaches that we've really, really loved, like recruiting is a part of their job. And I think it's got to be a little bit stressful. So this kind of answers like us, it's kind of a solution for coaches as well.
Recruitment, you know, when we think of the youth soccer realm, you don't tend to think about, oh, recruiting and we're going to go out there and we're
Yeah.
going to have that shark mentality. And I know for myself, like I'm not a shark, you know. I
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah.
so you know, we wanted to bring something to coaches as well to help them and to help get eyes on them. The more parents that want to have eyes on it, I think, you know,
Yes.
coaches will see that, okay, you know, I should put my team out there, and offer that transparency. You know, there are some coaches that offer up a little bit more information than others. You
Yes.
know, so with that being said, what do you think that would be super important for you to see from every single coach that you could ever find on SportsBridge?
Okay, well, I would start by years of experience
Hmm.
with the age that you're looking at. So if they're offering, you know, whatever team at the time, say it's like a 2012 team, how many years have you coached kids around that age group? I think that's really
Mm.
important. I think what does a coaching license mean? There's different levels of them. I think that's important because parents can then figure out, what essentially that values to them. But I think their coaching license is super important.
Hmm.
The background of them. And I don't mean like a background check. I just mean the background, a little bit about them. Like, what is their story that led them to coaching club soccer? Like, how did you get here? I think a short little bio is really important. It gets you a good feel of like, who am I going to be putting my child with for a while? Essentially, they're like a caretaker and huge influence on your child's life. That's
Hmm.
super important to us. I think especially having a young girl in club soccer, like a female. And it's important to me for her to find her voice and like feel like good in club sports. And for my son as well. But, I think as woman to woman feel, it's important for girls to feel that knowing who the person is going to be around her. I think now on the other side, logistics, I think it's going to be how many tournaments do they do a year? Like, what are we really looking at? I think knowing their average of what they did last year. I think playing like where they stood in league is important. That's information parents can access, on league websites, but having it right there, I think is really easy so parents can see what they're looking at.
I think that's super important too. Imagine, checking out a coach and just seeing, oh, okay, they were number, 5 in their league, and then comparing it to a team, okay, maybe this team was number 2. I think my daughter might be ready for maybe a higher quality team, or maybe they're not ready for that.
Because like our son, like I said, you're looking for different things with each kid. Like right now, we'd be looking, certain teams we're looking for is not necessarily who's doing the best, but like where are they performing within their league that we know he'll be a good asset and like a good fit. Because it's, everyone says it's not always about winning, which is true. It's not about winning. Is winning fun? Yes. But essentially Sports Bridge is not, for me, it would never be about like, I just want to find the team that wins. You can find that in Instagram posts, and turn
absolutely.
But I want to find like the core of the team and what that really looks like. And I think Sports Bridge can give that to parents.
How do you feel about a tryout flyer versus seeing a profile on Sports Bridge? Can you tell me that, how that experience is?
From the perspective of if I was just jumping into it for the first time, I think that flyer would maybe be a little bit more intimidating, seeing that it's tryouts. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean does it mean I'm trying you out and you're trying me out? Like if you're new to it, like, what does it mean? What you do find often though, is there's answers. If your kid doesn't make this team, there is another team they might potentially be able to be on. But then in the case of my son, like I told you before, he didn't essentially make something. So tryout, I think it can be a little bit more intimidating for new parents, not knowing what if my kid doesn't make it? Like, what if they're trying and like, I don't know what that looks like. I think now when you're looking at an individual team, again, as a new parent, it feels maybe a little bit more personal. Like it feels a little less intimidating. Like, hey, I'm going to actually talk to this coach who has this age group that's the same age as my kid. And maybe like if this isn't going to work out for him, it feels more of like a relationship experience where they can point me into the right direction.
Oh, wow. And that's something I never thought about, the intimidation factor, of seeing, the word tryout. Even as, a young soccer player, tryouts were just terrifying,
Yes.
So I can only imagine, how a parent or a child would, interpret the word tryout versus, hey, let's just connect with the coach, so
Right.
so I definitely see that. The last question that I have for you would be, what is something that you would tell a new parent going into this experience of club soccer? What would you tell them as a word of advice?
I think this advice was given to us by actually our neighbor who lives just next to me. Their daughters are amazing soccer players, college level now, played 7 years old all the way up through like ECNL teams. They've been through it all. And one of the best pieces of advice I was given that I would tell people is that you are your kid's advocate and you are your child's, essentially, you're their manager. And that's how you have to see it. Oh, I know those words sound so funny when we're talking about kids sports and I'm like manager, advocate, but the soccer world is super competitive. That's just the reality of it. And of course, there is loyalty to your team and your coach. But as a parent, your ultimate loyalty relies on your child. And I don't mean just in like their performance and like you get them on the best team. Managing doesn't always look like that. It looks like their happiness. It looks like where they're going to grow the most. Where are they going to develop? I mean, a lot of us get into the youth sports for just overall community development and learning how to work as a teammate. When you're an adult, it translates to work. So where are you going to find those best fits? I think when you have the mentality of like my child above everything else and doing what's best for them, I think the club soccer experience becomes really fantastic and great.
Well, that's such a good answer, and it's a great direction, to lead with your child's best interest, and I know I've told you as a coach, I've had players that, they were maybe finished with the journey of my team and ready to move on, and their that child's parent was for sure an advocate for them, and they made sure that, what I think that she's ready for something else, and that was just such a beautiful thing to watch, a parent sticking up for their child and doing what's right for them, because that player is now such an elite player, being invited to US national team ID camps, and it's just overall a really great thing to give parents back that control.
Yes, I'd agree. And again, it's not always about like when people hear manager and stuff, they think about the winning. Like a perfect example, our son, we have taken him from a team that's excelling and doing amazing, but we feel like he needs one more year at the level that they're not advancing to give him that confidence, to give him that better play. And so sometimes like being a good manager for your kid also looks like finding the other teams that might be not at this super high level, but a level that like he's going to have a better, he's going to be gifted more by playing a little bit lower competitive level than his team's advancing to give him more confidence. And that's part of like being a good parent manager, and also a part of using SportsBridge to help you accomplish those goals with your children.